Hello, I got a new toy. The Mitakon 35mm f0.95 Speedmaster lens for the X Mount on my Fujifilm X-T3. This lens, as you heard me say, is an f0.95mm. Obviously, that is the selling point of this lens, which I am filming on now, and pardon that I must look at the monitor because I am shooting wide open with this bad boy and the depth of field is shallow. Low light, fantastic. Bokeh, fantastic. We're gonna talk a bit about this lens, but first I wanna talk about how I got to this lens. I've only had my Fujifilm X-T3 for just over a year. Before that, I had no camera experience, just with an iPhone, shooting a lot of video and shooting pictures and whatnot. And I got my Fujifilm X-T3 with the 18 to 55mm kit lens. Yeah, I know, it's better than a kit lens. I was never super happy with that lens, but it was good enough. So I added a second lens, the Fujifilm, let's take this cap off here, XF35mm f2 lens, weather resistant, all around beast, super small, compact lens. This lens is very sharp, lots of contrast, really nice lens. Video, I thought it handled everything really well. I think the autofocus is great with it. Some people complain about it. Seems everyone has different opinions on everything, go figure. But I thought this lens is a workhorse. It does a great job and it is tiny, very small. The thing about this lens is that for me, there is no wow factor. It does everything so well. It is clinically sharp, but there's nothing about it that makes me reach for it. At first, I was reaching for it a lot when I had my 18 to 55. I then sold the 18 to 55 in order to upgrade to the 16 to 55 f2.8, and this lens became my everyday lens. I used it for everything, and what I was finding was 35mm at this f2.8 versus 35mm at f2. I just wasn't getting enough of a difference for me to reach for this little guy whenever I had the zoom lens that could do everything. And quite frankly, 35 at f2.8 wasn't too far off from this, almost threw it, 35mm at f2. So this has been sitting in my bag a lot. Every once in a while I'll grab it to go out for walks and take pictures, and I'm always super happy with what this can do. But again, no wow factor. So fast forward a bit now, I was browsing some Facebook groups. Shout out to every single person that has a Facebook page. I don't know who I was shouting out there. I was browsing some Facebook groups for Fujifilm users and saw some pictures from the Mitakon. I've seen the lens before, I've seen pictures from it, but I saw some portraits where I was like, oh man, that lens takes some very awesome portraits. So before I talk about the more technical details or what I'm seeing with it, let me just start by saying this lens inspires creativity. Anybody that's used it, I would assume anybody that's used it, maybe there's some people that will disagree, but just about anybody that's used it will admit this is a lens that is inspirational. It's for certain types of people though. First off, it's a manual focus lens. If you do not have the patience to dial in your shot and take it that way, whether video or photo, then it's probably not for you. I would suggest trying a manual focus lens before you dive into this one, especially with how narrow this depth of field is, because when it comes to manual focus and having to nail focus, this one requires it the most. You can't be off or it will be very noticeable. So for me, my manual focus journey started when I first got my camera. I picked up this Minolta 58mm f1.4 from this lens taught me how to use manual focus. I had a lot of fun shooting it. It was a bit soft, probably some haze in it or something, I don't know, but the portraits were still nice, but sunlight just kind of wrecked my pictures, and even with a hood, it suffered. And then I also eventually picked up this Minolta 135mm f2.8. This one, even better results from, very sharp, And I'm still planning to use this one quite a bit because I like that 135mm reach for portraits and stuff. So I started with those lenses, really started to fall in love with the process of shooting manual focus. It felt like I was more in the moment, more in control of what I was doing, rather than just setting a box and clicking. Now, don't get me wrong, I would choose autofocus if I needed to rely on it. If this lens had autofocus, you best believe I'd be using it. I'm not here to hate on autofocus because I am just like anyone else. I prefer it. But for video, you know, it's really nice to go with manual focus anyway, and you can watch 1,000 YouTube videos on why you should be shooting manual focus, and I'm sure it'll have a clever title like Reasons Why You Should Never Use Autofocus in Video, and they'll just go on about all of that. If you like to rack focus and do things like this, where you come into focus, you know, manual focus is the way to go. Beside all of that, if you are not a manual focus shooter, I give you permission, click pause, go find a different video, look at the recommended, get out of here. You don't want this lens. Because what's gonna happen is you'll buy this lens, you'll test it out, and you'll realize, hey, manual focus isn't so bad when the result is this good. Or maybe you'll be really mad at me and you wasted a lot of money. So on to what the pictures and video and stuff looks like from this lens. What I've found in my 2 days, keep that in mind, still in the honeymoon phase, 2 days of owning this lens, what I found is that the center of the picture is sharp, but still soft at the same time. I think you can tell from this video, and I'm sorry if I've been out of focus. It's tough, it's very tough. I think you can tell what I'm talking about here, that the detail is there, but there's a smoothness to it. It's not like a glowing softness. I'm not using a diffuser on this lens right now. This is shooting just directly through a variable ND because yes, even inside during the day, you're gonna need an ND filter if you're shooting video because of the light that comes in. If you want it wide open, ND filter is going to be necessary pretty much at all times, unless you're shooting at night. Even then, honestly, I wouldn't be surprised. So my eyes are in focus right now, and because the depth of field is so shallow, if you were to zoom in on my eyes, you'll see that it's super sharp, but everything else has a softness because it's so narrow that only a little bit will be in focus when you're this close. You know, I'm within 2 feet from the lens right now because I wanted to show off, you know, really push it. The minimum focus distance is like a foot. But yeah, there's like a softness about it. It's sharp in the center, it's sharp with what's in focus, and everything else has a beautiful softness about it. And it starts to fall off on the edges. The edges have even more softness, a bit of vignetting. Personally for me, I've never been someone who has a strong opinion about that. I don't shoot landscapes, so I don't care about sharpness from edge to edge. When it comes to portraits, I've never been like, oh, I want it to fall off. But I'll tell you, with this lens, I have enjoyed that. I've enjoyed that the edges get softer, and even the vignetting, I've never been a big fan of vignetting, but a little bit I found with this lens, I have zero problem with it. It really feels like any portrait that I take, the eyes are drawn straight to the subject. That fall off on the edge just kind of takes away the distraction and brings you right in, which is the whole point of why people want this depth of field, why they want this background separation, is so that your eyes are drawn to the subject. So that fall off on the edges, to me, it kind of adds to this vibe, this feel of the lens that really is pleasant. It's a very pleasant vibe that you're getting from pictures and videos from the lens. Now, would I recommend this lens? I think it's pretty obvious that yes, I would recommend it, but only to those who, A, are okay with manual focus, because if you're not, again, there's no reason for you to even touch this lens. And it's not for anyone, B, it's not for anyone who wants to shoot landscapes. This is not an all-around lens. Let's face it, if you're going out to shoot a landscape, first off, you don't need 0.95 aperture. That's kind of ridiculous, unless you're shooting in pitch black darkness and you want that. That's a different story, but for landscape, you don't need that super high aperture. You want sharpness across your image, edge to edge. This is not that lens. And really, if you're looking for an everyday use lens, probably isn't it either. You know, if you're looking for a 35mm everyday use lens, you know, I would recommend this Fujifilm 35mm f2. I think it's a super nice, sharp lens, as I had already alluded to. So with that said, I would recommend this to anyone that wants something inspirational. You want something in your arsenal that inspires you to go out and shoot, that inspires you, that fuels creativity for you. For me, this lens has been that. I've had it again for 2 days. I think it's the third time I've said it. I have countless times just been like, I need to go out, I need to take pictures, I need to shoot. And I haven't really been doing that anytime recently. I haven't been feeling that urge. So far, man, this lens has exceeded my expectations, and my expectations were high, you know, seeing what other people produce with it. I thought, this can be a nice lens. Personally, for me, I don't really see many cons with it. The aperture ring is declicked, which I prefer because I do shoot video, and you never know when you might need to make a slight adjustment while you're in the middle of filming, but it can be easy to accidentally bump that while you're doing your manual focus. I've seen people complain about that, and I've already experienced that. I bumped it up to f1.4 and had no clue that I did until I snapped a few pics and then realized it. So that's I guess one of the few cons I would mention, but other than that, for what I got it for, which is creative portraits, videos where I'm trying to get a nice dreaminess, probably do some nice B-roll that's 60 frames right about now, and you'll see things just come in and out of focus so nice and slow, and it's gonna be beautiful. And if I didn't, then I'd probably just look stupid saying all of that. But yeah, that's what I plan to use it for a lot, is that like dreaminess of coming into focus and out of focus. And you know, I'd love to shoot some events with it and you know, pack this 16 to 55 for, you know, when I really need that sharpness and clarity and contrast. And then this bad boy, the 35mm f0.95, that's ridiculous. f0.95 for whenever I want those dreamier shots and creamier, dreamy and creamy bokeh. Dreamy, creamy bokeh. Delicious. Anyway, when I want those dreamy and creamy shots, this is the lens for it. It's really something. I've probably been out of focus for half of this video, and I do apologize, but please give me some grace, as this is razor thin depth of field, and I have been looking into the lens and not the monitor enough, so yeah, I move a lot when I talk. Anyway, this has been my review of the Mitakon Speedmaster 35mm f0.95 lens. Peace.